You know, I keep talking about the fact that I have an overly stuffed TBR, and I also keep talking about the fact that I have an overly stuffed whole entire year's worth TBR. But why is this the case? Welcome back to Mr. Francy Reads! Let's go! Yes, hello and welcome back to Mr. Francy Reads. I am, of course, Mr. Francy, and I'm truly honoured that you've once again chosen to join me today, or if you're new, hello and welcome. But if you are returning, I'm truly honoured that you've once again chosen to join me today as we discuss the Yearly TBR. Why do I do it? Alright, now before I get into discussing why I do a Yearly TBR and why it definitely works for me, just a couple of things to do with housekeeping. First of all, this may be the first time that you are clicking on a booktube video, and so therefore you're probably looking at me saying, Mr. Francy, what the heck is a TBR? Allow me to explain. TBR is an acronym that stands for the words to be read. So it's basically when I say that I'm talking about my TBR, I am talking literally in a generalized way about what is to be read for me. For me, I plan a year in advance. I'm a very structured reader, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But when I say I plan a yearly TBR, I don't just mean that I have put aside, I usually read about 125 books a year. I don't say I put aside 125 books and I'll get to whichever one when I feel like it. No. I mean, it's all completely structured. I have about 14 books that I plan to read every single month from January through to December, and I already know which book I'm reading when in that month as well. It is completely planned out. The reason why I keep saying I have an overly stuffed TBR is because the most amount of books I've ever read in a month was 14, and currently every single month for 2025 from January through to December already has 14 books in them. Again, the most amount of books I've ever read is 14, and I think that happened once. It may have happened twice in the 6 years that I've nearly been on booktube. As I have shared many times, I do suffer from anxiety. I don't know if I've gone into detail about saying that it is a generalized anxiety, but it is. It's very much a generalized anxiety. There is no specific, this one thing is my one trigger. Not at all. To give you a great example, I went to the dentist recently and I was explaining to this new dentist that I now have that I suffer from anxiety. She turned around and said to me, oh, that's normal. Everyone's anxious when they go to the dentist. And I said to her, no, my anxiety has nothing to do with the fact that I'm coming to see you and that I'm going to a dentist, because I don't fear the dentist. I know a lot of people do. I don't. No, my anxiety at that point was being in the waiting room. Yeah, I really can't stand being in a waiting room. I don't know anyone who loves being in a waiting room, but the majority of people that I know are fine to sit in a waiting room. They'll deal with it, and it doesn't bring up anxiety or anxiousness within them. With me, it absolutely does. I sit in a waiting room, and the longer I am there, the more anxious I am getting. That's just how I am. But that's only one side of my anxiety and what triggers that. It is generalized because there is no one pinpointed thing. But one thing that I have worked out in my life that has made my life a lot easier when it comes to my anxiety is knowing that I get anxious when it comes to the unknown, and specifically the fear of that unknown. So, you know, it is what it is, and I try to find ways to deal with that. But anytime I'm in a situation where there is even the remotest possibility of a certain thing that's going to happen, and I don't know what that outcome is, I fear that I'm not in control of that situation, and I get very anxious about it. To relate that back to my yearly TBR, because suddenly we're going from yee to in this video, and I don't want to do that. But to relate that back to the yearly TBR. The lesson I've learned here is to make sure I structure as much as I can. This allows me to feel like I'm in control of what I'm doing. Now, yes, again, that is a generalized statement because that is the case. It's not just my reading. I structure everything that I can. I make laundry lists every single day of things I need to get through, and part of that reason is to ensure that when I go to bed at night, I know I've done everything I need to do that day, or if I didn't get through it all, that there was a good reason, and it wasn't because I simply forgot. And again, it's not a bad thing if I don't get something done, but it's more of a, I forgot and I didn't know that I'd forgotten, and why did I forget? And that's when I start spiraling. So, you know, it's a big thing for me. So I'm just going to bring up a couple of scenarios for you that has helped lead me to planning my yearly TBR. And scenario number one is, what do I do when I don't have anything left to read? Yeah, so this is very much a legitimate thing. I started this channel nearly 6 years ago. In a couple of weeks, it will be my 6-year anniversary on BookTube, which is a very long time. And one of the best things about it having been so long is the fact that I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. In my early years on BookTube, I had times when I got through my TBR of that month, and I only ever planned ahead a monthly TBR. And I would sit there and say, well, that's great that I finished the last book early, yay, but at the same time, what the heck am I reading next? And yeah, it would lead to anxiety. So my lesson was learned. And I learnt the lesson and made longer TBRs for myself. I used to put 7 to 9 books on a TBR. I now have between 10 and 14. Next thing was anxiety over arranging the upcoming month's TBR. Okay, so my current month's TBR may be set, but come the 18th, 19th, 20th of that month, I got to the point of, oh no, I still haven't planned the next month's reading. Yeah, and that's anxiety right there. Like, I haven't planned the next month's reading. What the heck am I going to read next month? Oh my gosh, I need to plan it now, because if I don't plan it now, it's not going to... When I tell you I suffer from anxiety, yeah, I do. And that's what goes through my head. Like, it's full on a tailspin for me. So, I then went on to write. This is bad because I am then stressing out about planning what to read in the upcoming month. Exactly. So the lesson was learned. I learned my lesson and decided to plan a couple of months in advance. This worked so well for me that I thought to myself, hey, if planning a couple of months in advance works, why not a year? Now, granted, Elizabeth from Lizzie Faye Loves Books' SAS list idea has helped so much, because back in the day I predominantly read standalones. Having a list of series, many lists of series I should say, that I want to get through cuts way back on the amount of books I need to discover and then put on my TBR. Yeah, that point definitely needs to be made here. If you are a reader of standalone books and you're looking to create a yearly TBR, it would be more stressful, I imagine, for you than for me, because if you are, say, I'm just giving a number 125, you may read less, you may read more, but let's just go with my number because that's what I know. So if you're planning on, planning a 125 book yearly TBR, and they're all standalones, you're needing to find 125 books. I'm not. I have 20, I'm just looking at my manual list over there, I have 20 series on my SAS list this year. That takes up a ton of my TBR. So there you go. That's already, the majority of my yearly TBR set, purely because I have 20 series that I want to start, continue on with, or complete by the end of the year. Number 3, anxiety over not reading enough from a certain genre or reading too much of a certain genre. Yeah, and both come from the same place. So the anxiety of not reading enough from a certain genre, definitely. I am an eclectic reader. I love the fact that I am an eclectic reader when it comes to genres. I read so many different genres all the time, and that's not something that I want to stop doing. So in order to ensure that I continue to do that, mapping out a yearly TBR will ensure that I get to different genred books throughout the year. Reading too much of a certain genre, yeah. So in the words of Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, contrary-wise, I love that, contrary-wise, as far as, going from not reading enough from a certain genre, contrary-wise, reading too much of a certain genre. Yeah, if I don't plan out my reading, my TBR, let me tell you, this is how it will go. All year, all I will read, and I mean all I will read, will be cozy mysteries. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I know people who exclusively read cozy mysteries. I know people who may only read one other genre and then mostly read cozy mysteries. There's nothing at all wrong with reading cozies. For me, the reason why it would be a problem is because, as I say, I am an eclectic genred reader, and I love that I am. I love that in my very first year on booktube in March of 2020, I started in January. In March of 2020, I specifically decided to broaden my horizons and pick up books from genres that I don't typically read. What I found out and took away from that experience is that there are genres out there I didn't think I would like that I love. One great example is sci-fi. Sci-fi really shocked me. I thought I would absolutely hate and couldn't stand reading sci-fi. And then I found out there are so many different types of sci-fi books. And by that, I need to be specific. Not every single sci-fi that is out there is set in space. And I thought it was. And the idea of traversing space never really interested me. And so thinking and just overgeneralizing and stereotyping sci-fi myself had me missing out on these great books. I picked up a sci-fi book that was about robots and I loved it, and I'll move on from that. But anyway, I also have picked up technology related sci-fi books that are not set in space that I love. The whole sci-fi system, I don't know what you call it. In fantasy, we call it a magic system when you explore the magic. So the sci-fi system, if that makes sense, in sci-fis, I love when it comes to the technology and the advancements of technology. My point is, I love so many different genres. It's not a question of I need to read many different genres to be a well-read reader. Not at all. It is I love so many different genres, and I want to make sure that I'm not just reading one genre. Great way to ensure that is to have my yearly TBR, because then I can literally go ahead and plan and say, okay, in October, I know I want to read some horrors because it is Halloween month and other things. But as well, like, I don't just want to read horror in October. So where else can I put some horrors in? And, I have that time to play with the year and go, okay, where am I going to put this one and that one and that one and that one? It's quite fun for me. Anyway. Next up, my next anxiety is, okay, fine, I have the list of books that I want to read for the year, but when exactly will I read each book? That, was another big anxiety trigger for me. So I would start my monthly TBR and think, what am I going to read? Which one? How do I pick? It's like the proverbial saying, like picking between your children. I don't have children. So, like, which one? Which one do I start with? Why am I picking that one? Why not that one? And you can see I'm going to go into a tailspin right now thinking about that. I fortunately found a way to fix that. And so for those of you who have been with me long enough, you're well aware that I do this. But for those of you who are new, I always read my TBRs in my books on my TBR for the month in page count order. What I mean by this is I always start with the longest book on my TBR and work my way through in descending order, and the last book that I pick up will be the shortest book in page count. This works for me on two levels. One, it's a very clear-cut, distinct, easy way to order which book I'm going to read when in the month, but also it takes the pressure off myself towards the end of the month because I've read my longest books at the beginning. So my next thing that I would be anxious about is, will my books get here on time? That is another thing that I definitely need to bring up for you to understand why I have a yearly TBR as opposed to a monthly, weekly, or daily TBR. And that is because I prefer American editions of books in comparison to the UK ones. Firstly, let me explain why I prefer US editions, and then let me explain how that adds to my anxiety as well. It's a double-edged sword. So, I have done some wider research on why the covers of American the US edition of books appeal to me more than the UK ones, and it does make a lot of sense. The funding for US editions of books is more prioritized with the illustrator, the artist that does the artistry for the cover. The funding for UK books are more spent on writing an amazing premise. The reason for this is because it is believed, whether this is the case or not, it is believed by these people who decide the funding that Americans will pick up books based on the look of the cover. People in the UK will pick up books based on the premise they read on the back of the book. And so that's why the funding is spent there. Because of that fact, the artistry that is placed onto a cover of an American book is going to, in my opinion, always look so much better because there is so much more funding allotted to that artistry compared to what they have in the UK. I live in Australia, and as far as I'm aware, there isn't an Australian edition of a book. So what we get by default is the UK edition of books. The only time we will get a US edition is if there is only a US edition. Because of this, I need to factor in how long it's going to take for me to get these American edition books. They don't appear overnight. They take even longer than a week. Some might take a month to get to me, or a little bit less than a month. So because of that, not only am I needing to plan my TBR in advance, but I need to order my books in advance. I can schedule when I'm ordering what books to ensure that they get here when they do. So like very early in January, I'm already starting to order my February TBR because I already have the January one, if that makes sense, and so on and so forth. So that I can ensure they are here, because the amount of times that I used to order my cozy mysteries, and I'm sorry, cozy fans, but it was always the cozy mysteries that were the longest to get here, always. But the amount of times I would order my cozies back in the day and they wouldn't be here by the time I was ready, I learnt my lesson early on. And one day, in Mr. Francy's lovely dreams, I am going to open a bookstore in my area. And it is going to be something like Mr. Francy's US bookstore. And all I will stock is US editions of books for Australians to come in and purchase the US editions. But anyway, it is what it is. So yeah, I mean, there's so much more that I did want to say about this. I'll just quickly point out, there are some cons when it comes to creating a yearly TBR. One thing is, the flexibility isn't there, or it's very, very close to being impossible to be flexible with me, because I have planned out my whole year's TBR. I have planned it not only each book and each month, but when I'm reading what book in what month. So when someone else comes up with another great idea and I have FOMO, it is almost impossible for me to change my structured TBR. I can't add because I already have 14 already in there, hence why I always say it's my overly stuffed TBR. So I am at the point where I will need to sacrifice a book, which sounds so dramatic, but that is how it feels for me. I need to sacrifice a book to put in another one. As far as the pros are concerned, I know what I'm reading and when I'm going to read it. That is not only going to help my anxiety, but it also helps me to go ahead and plan things for the year, like buddy reads, for example, where I can say, and did in December, I'm reading this series, this series, this series, book 1, 2, 3, 1 in this month, 2, this one, 3, this one, because I already know, I've already got it planned. Yeah, there are so many benefits for me having a yearly TBR. This video was not filmed with the intention of me saying you need to change your way and you need to do a yearly TBR too. Not at all. It is literally me explaining why I plan out a yearly TBR, and hopefully it does now make sense. Alright, that is where I am going to leave it for this one. If you have any comments, thoughts, and or questions, or things you would like me to discuss, please do not hesitate to let me know in the comment section below. But in the meantime, I'm going to let you all go with peace, blessings, and so much love. Please do be kind, love one another, and spread your sparkling energy all throughout the world. And until next time, sparkle, 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 and happy reading. Bye everyone!